Hi everybody, and welcome to A Considered Craft. My name is Jess, and I am coming to you today from Kingston, New York on unceded Munsee Lenape lands. It's nice to be home. I will say it is Wednesday, April the 13th. Happy birthday, Dad, if you're watching this. It's my dad's birthday. I got to talk to him a little while ago. I'm not sure when I'll get this edited and up, but I am recording it on the 13th of April. And thought I would just pop in and do maybe a quick episode. I feel like I say that all the time, and then my episodes end up being longer than I expected. But I'm really excited to talk to you about what I'm wearing, which is a pattern that is about to be released, and thought I would just pop in and do a quick episode and say a quick hi to everyone out there. Thank you so much to those of you who are returning, and welcome to everyone who is just joining me for the first time. This is a podcast where I primarily talk about things that I've made, which is mostly knitting. And today I want to talk about this beautiful, beautiful, great spring, summer, fall, transition season, layerable shirt. So this is the Foxberry tee by Sari Nordlund, which I had the opportunity to test knit, and it was really fun. I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the modifications that I made. This pattern might look familiar to you. She released a long sleeve version of the Foxberry that had this beautiful intricate lace and bobble pattern down on the sleeves, but the pattern I think is similar. You have a few choices in the design. She offers a small bobble, which I went with, and a larger bobble if you choose to do this t-shirt. The original version, if you're interested in a long sleeve option, was one where she held it together with mohair. I'm just going to check. I think it was the original version, she did 2 yarns held together, a light fingering and a lace weight mohair to get to a DK weight pattern. And so if you're up for that, there is also a long sleeve version of this. The version that I made here, this is still a DK weight version, but this is with mostly it's designed for yarns held singly, which is what I did. So what did I use for yarn? If you've watched the podcast before, this yarn might look a tiny bit similar to you, although different. A couple episodes ago, I'll put a link below. I made a love note out of Quince Co organic cotton Whimbrel, which is their worsted Aran weight yarn. And I made it for a friend's daughter, and I just kept looking at the color. And I was just like, oh gosh, this dusty pink is really attractive to me, and I was so enjoying knitting with the Whimbrel, but I wanted something lighter weight version, and Willet is the little sister of Whimbrel. I don't know how clearly that came through. I usually put the information down below. Willet is a sport DK weight organic cotton that is grown and milled here, all domestically and dyed in the US. And this is 146 meters per 50 grams. So that would be, what would that be? That would be, oh gosh, 392 meters for 50 grams, which is a lightweight. So Sport DK is what they call it. No, it would be, this is why I don't do math in my head. It would be 292, not 392, which makes way more sense. So just under 300 meters per 100 grams. Whew, is the weight on that. And it's a high twist, really, see if you can see it in the, If you can see it in the ball. It's a pretty high twist yarn, and let's just pull it apart here. I'm pretty sure it's 3 plies, but let's just do a little pull apart and see. Yep, looks like we've got three little plies in here. So it's got some bounce. I thought the stitch definition would work really well, and it really did. I swatched for this first using another beautiful organic cotton yarn that I'm looking forward to making another kind of summer top in. But I didn't think the stitch definition was really going to show what this pattern had to offer, so I switched to the Willet. So I'm going to insert some pictures if I haven't already, so you can get a better overall view of what the sweater looks like. But let me see if I can. I have my camera on a rolling cart, which is very exciting. So let me see if I can bring the camera a little closer and show you. I don't know with the shadows how much of a good view you got, but I'll insert some photos where you'll have a much better view. But it's this really lovely textural pattern just at the yoke. And then I did not really a cropped body. I did a little bit of waist shaping and then some ribbing at the bottom, and it's all, the rest of the body is just stockinette. So once I separated for the sleeves, this thing just flew. Like finishing off the sleeves, I chose to go pretty short on the sleeves, and it's a length that I like, and so the sleeves went super fast, and then I finished the rest of the body. And let me tell you about the modifications that I made. The first one is that if you have not knit with a plant-based or primarily plant-based fiber before, one of the things to know is that it is going to stretch and drape in a different way than an animal-based fiber will. So there's not so much bounce in the fabric. And I've had a lot of experience with this, and I've made a lot of things that also did not fit me the way that I wanted. So I took a little bit of a gamble with this, and I knit this to fit with negative ease for even the blocked swatch. I don't feel like, unless you do a really big swatch, I don't think you get the full scope of what's going to happen with the fabric with these plant-based fibers. And this is where I ran into trouble in the past. So building on some of my experiences, I went down quite a bit. I'm going to insert another rather unflattering but demonstrative photo of how this fit me before I blocked it, which is essentially very, very, very tight, particularly in the chest. But I knew when I blocked this that it was going to get bigger, and I also know that as I wear it over time, it's going to get longer. And so I made, the first modification was really to choose a much smaller size than my measurements would suggest. So I went with something that, without doing all the calculations, I'm guessing I was about 2 inches of, 3 inches maybe, of negative ease from my full bust. So what else did I do? Because I did make a few other modifications. So let's see what I did. The first modification I made is that this pattern calls for you to knit double the amount of ribbing that I did and then fold it over and have this doubled collar, which I think in some ways is a really good idea and will give you a nice sturdy collar and also feels very kind of the moment. There's a lot of sweaters being designed this way, but particularly I live in a pretty, most of the year in the climate in Kingston for the time that I'm here tends to be hot and sticky. And so having a doubled over neck wasn't as appealing to me. So I just did half of the amount. So I did a 2-inch ribbing single instead of a 4-inch ribbing and then folding it over. Now I sort of held out that I might actually, for a while I was thinking about once I got it blocked, how interesting maybe it would look if I folded the 2-inch collar over and just had a 1-inch but doubled. But I really liked where the collar ended up landing, and I like that this is not double thick, so I think I'm going to just leave that as is. So that was the first modification that I made. Forgot to say, this is a top-down yoke sweater top. So you start up here and you work your way down. What else did I do? I went with the smaller Bobble option. She gives 2 in the pattern, and this was my first time. I did 2 projects recently, both at the same time. Both were my first time doing bobbles. So that was sort of interesting, and I wasn't sure how bobbles were going to work in a plant-based yarn also. So I went with the smaller, and I did 2 things to kind of perk up my bobbles, some of which I kind of pieced together from a bunch of different videos that I watched. And also on my knit night, one of the people who participate in the knit night does a lot of design and pattern support, and they gave me another tip as well. So the first thing I did was I did this sort of choker stitch, and the best way to describe that, I guess, is once I had the bobble made, I wrapped the yarn around the bobble before I then continued on with my knitting. Like I almost made, it's not exactly a yarn over. I don't know what else to call it other than like a choker stitch, because I just wrapped the yarn around the bobble and then continued knitting. So that was one thing I did. And the next thing I did that honestly I did kind of at the beginning, and then I switched out of doing it, and because I wasn't seeing it make a big difference, but it might make a difference over time, is that on the row below where I made the bobble, I slipped the stitch that had the bobble on it. So instead of knitting it on the next row, I just slipped it. So those were kind of the bobble modifications or techniques that I used. The other thing I did is when I split for the sleeves, this is something I do on a lot of garments that I make, I put a few more of the stitches to the front instead of splitting evenly for the sleeves. And that's because the way my body is shaped, I'm bigger busted, and so I like a smaller fit up here for my smaller shoulders, and then I need to do some increasing for my bust. I do a little decreasing for some light waist shaping, and then I usually need to increase back out to accommodate my hips as well. On this one, the first thing I did was when I split, I put 2 more stitches on each side onto the front. And so that even started me out with a few more stitches. And then I also did increases on the front only for the bust 5 times. So I put a marker in the middle of where I've cast on the underarm stitches for the sleeves. I put a marker so I know where my side seam is. I started that side seam 2 stitches further back. So I had 2 extra stitches on this side, 2 extra stitches on this side, and then I've got my side seam marked. Then what I did on subsequent rows was I spaced out increases 5 times. So I would slip the marker, knit 1, increase 1, continue across the front. 1 stitch before this other side marker, I would increase 1, knit 1, slip that side, there isn't really a seam there, but just that center underarm. And then I didn't do any increases on the back. So that was the increasing that I did for my bust. And I had those spaced out about every less than half an inch. They were apart, the rounds where I did the increases. They were pretty close together. I think I have a picture of it. If I do, I'll insert where I put a marker in every time I do the increase. So if I have that, I'll put it in. Then I knit straight for 3 inches. And then I began some waist decreases at each side, and those I do front and back, and I did that 4 times. So I had increased 10 stitches for the bust. I decreased back out 16 stitches for the waist. I continued until the body was about 11 inches. That was about 2 inches shorter than what I wanted, so 11 inches from the underarm. Then what I did, because the pattern calls for you to use smaller stitches for this, it's actually twisted rib at the neck, at the cuff, and at the hem. And so I used a much smaller needle. I can tell you what needle sizes I used. You shouldn't use the needle size that gets gauged for you. So the body of this was knit in 3.5 millimeter or US 4, and I went down to a 3 millimeter or US 2.5 for the ribbing. So I was getting ready to do the ribbing, and I knew this was likely to hit me, you know, past my natural waist, and I didn't, so it was going to be where my hips start to increase again, and so I didn't want to switch to a smaller needle size and have it like suck in where my body flares out. But I wanted the ribbing to look consistent with the neck and the sleeve cuff. So I just did a couple of increases. Let's see what I did. I did 4 stitches to do to increase right before the round before I switched to the smaller needles, and then did the ribbing for 2 inches. So yeah, that's what I did. And then I did a couple of different bind offs looking for the right one in this yarn. I think the pattern calls for or recommends a sewn bind off or the bind off of your choice. And really, I was a little too lazy to do the sewn bind off, and I was aware that I had this learning from another sweater where I did the sewn bind off on the hem. If I needed to come back after the fact and adjust the length any direction, which I knew was a risk with this cotton yarn, it was really difficult to undo a sewn bind off. And so I didn't want to do that for this project. So I tried a couple of different bind offs. I watched a whole bunch of YouTube videos, and what I ended up going with, if somebody knows if there's a name for this bind off to properly refer to it, I don't know what it is, but I did it in pattern. And so what I did was, if it was a knit one, I actually knit one through the back loop because this is twisted rib. And then if the next stitch was a purl one, I purled one. And then whatever the second stitch was, I had now 2 stitches on my right needle. I knit or purled the 2 together depending on what the second stitch was. So if the second stitch I did was a purl stitch, I purled 2 together. If the second stitch I did was a knit through the back loop, then I knit 2 together to do the bind off. I hope that made sense. And it ended up looking really beautiful. There's no flare, there's no open holes that you can see with the bind off. It's perfectly stretchy. I'm really happy with it. I used 934 yards, which is just over 850 meters of this yarn. And for size, and I knit the size 3, I forgot to say. I knit the size 3. My gauge was slightly tighter than the gauge that was recommended. And this is fitting me really well. My full bust measurement is somewhere between a 43 and 44, and my upper bust measurement is around a 37, 38, 36, goes up and down. So somewhere in that area, if that gives you an idea, that's how much I sized down for using yarn that I knew was going to stretch out. It was really fun to knit. This part definitely took longer than I am used to because the bobbles do have some labor involved in them. I often do color work yokes. I've done a few textured yokes, and but this took me a little bit longer than a color work yoke would. First time with bobbles, a little lace going on, but the pattern was really easy to follow, incredibly well written. I mean, the issues that we as test knitters found were really minor, so I think you can expect like a really high quality pattern without likely to have some mistakes or corrections. Because we were all on the same thread, so I saw the adjustments or corrections or questions that that other people had who were knitting other sizes as well. I think this pattern is scheduled to come out tomorrow, and wow, what else can I tell you about it? I have a textured yoke sweater that I love that maybe I'll talk about at some point. It's really unfortunate it's not particularly size inclusive. It's called Sari, and it's got these giant textured, almost diamonds, and I love it, and I find it easier to wear in some ways than some of my colorwork sweaters because, you know, it's a solid color, so I find that I can wear this with the other sweater with more things, and I feel the same way already about this Foxberry tee. And what I am so excited about with this is I have worn this on client calls already, including a more conservative, dressy kind of client, but I also have found it so comfortable. I threw it on this morning to run out and get coffee. I have had it on when I've just been around the house. I've been wearing it with jeans. I tried it on with a summer skirt this morning, and I was like, ooh, I can't wait for it to be warm enough that I could wear it with kind of a basic A-line shape black skirt. I wore it with jeans. It's a little too short for me to be entirely comfortable. I only have one pair of jeans. I don't wear jeans a lot. But I think if I had a different pair of jeans, then maybe I would feel more comfortable. But the jeans I have are really tight at the waist, and this shows more of that than I'm particularly comfortable with. So I've been wearing a lot with like high-waisted black pants that are also super comfortable, and I feel really put together and really comfortable. And the joy of cotton is I can put this in my washing machine. So maybe sometime down the line, I'll do an update about how it holds up after multiple washes. I probably won't put it in the dryer unless I, you know, want to do something with the shaping or I really need it to dry quickly for some reason. I tend not to put even a lot of my store-bought clothes. I prefer to hang dry, and, you know, it saves energy, and I think it helps my clothes last longer, and I keep my things for a really long time generally, so I probably won't put it in the dryer. But yeah, so the Foxberry tee, Sari Nordlund, check out the other examples. People made some beautiful, beautiful garments. A number of people used this sort of dusky pink. I remember seeing some in this beautiful like soft cream, and I thought, oh, that's really pretty. The other yarn I swatched in that I didn't think showed the pattern as well was a sort of deeper burnt orange. So if you're looking for something really subtle, maybe a darker color would be a good choice for you, but just know that you might want to swatch and see how much the pattern shows up in that darker color if that's important to you. Yeah, I guess that's all I've got to tell you today. I have been knitting on other things. I did have some yarn that was waiting for me when I got back home to New York, and I think I'm going to do a separate episode where I talk about those things. I see I've already been talking for over 20 minutes, and I thought, oh, this will be 10 minutes. I'll just say a few things, but I have a lot to say about it, and I hope you find it useful and enjoyable, and I find it so inspiring to hear about what other people do, even if I don't choose to make that exact pattern. But should you choose to make the Foxberry tee, I think you're in great shape with a well-designed, fun to make, you know, interesting here, gonna go super quick for the rest of it. And I could also see wearing this over a dress. I could see wearing this over a longer sleeve shirt. Oh, I know what somebody asked me, the lace. So I don't know how well you can see, this does have a little bit of lace. I have not been wearing a tank top under it. I've been wearing, you know, a bra that matches my skin tone, and I don't feel like it is, It still feels very modest to me. I don't feel like I'm showing anything that I don't wish to show to the world, and it's very modest. So if that's an important consideration for you, because it was a question actually that somebody asked me about making a summer shirt that maybe you have to wear another layer under, and I haven't felt like I've needed to wear another layer. So I hope that helps. Please leave me a note and let me know if you are inclined, and let me know what are your favorite spring and summer things to make, whether they're garments or other things, and what is your experience with knitting garments in plant-based yarn? How do you think about the sizing adjustments you might need to make? That I think the swatches kind of lie when you do swatches for plant-based stuff, because there's so much change over time. So I'm curious what you've found and how you manage that. I hope to record again soon. I really want to take you around and show you a little bit of Kingston and show you a little bit of our sweet apartment and show you some of the yarn I got on the road and the other projects I've been working on that I haven't shown you yet. And so I'll be back soon. Take care, everyone. Hug your loved ones. Bye.